Hey, welcome in to the FF Squared podcast. I am your co-host, Jesse Moeller, along with my co-host, Prue Patel. And this week, we are going to be talking about rookies, ones that are we view under and overvalued, and we're going to be synergizing that with insurance. Sorry, my brain's all over the place after a 10-hour day at the study clinic. But yeah, that's our plan. We do have a special guest. Our special guest is Scott Rinear. I'm sure a lot of you know him on Twitter as FF Munder Difflin, and we are going to bring him on. So go ahead and welcome Scott Rinear. Hey, Scott, so why don't you tell us no problem. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and all the cool content you're doing these days?
All right. Scott Rinear, Munder Difflin FF. Been kind of in the fantasy space for about 2.5 years at this point. I kind of joined along with a lot of other people during the pandemic when everything went digital. So I write a column series and produce a silly YouTube series for In Between Media. Column series is called The Mundies. It's based off the Dundies, just like my Twitter handle, all based off The Office. And like a lot of the work at In Between Media, it combines, I talk a lot about some of the struggles I've had, mental health, addiction, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of try and use my experience to help and then blend that, sometimes better, sometimes not, blend that with fantasy football. And then the YouTube series is called Pulp Fantasy, and it's just a pet project that I thought would be fun. My buddy Ariel at Trash Sandwiches on Twitter, she's my co-host now, but we make fun of football. We make fun of fantasy football by comparing it to movie scenes, TV scenes. The last one we did, it took forever, but we got some guests from around the industry, and we did a parody of the movie Draft Day, which was really fun. So, and then I co-host the Fantasy Football podcast over there. And then I also I write articles for Fantasy Data.
Yeah, that's you sound like a very busy individual, if I say so myself.
Pretty busy, and also have the full-time not fantasy job to contend with. But it works. It works. I wouldn't do it if it didn't.
Right, exactly. Right. I saw that the NFL draft skate you did. It was the ending in particular just had me rolling. I was like, I couldn't stop laughing. It was one of my favorite skits I've seen in a while.
That was a lot. It was a lot of work. It took a lot of fun. One last thing for those who celebrate, happy Zelda Tears of the Kingdom release day. Releases later tonight. Got my Zelda shirt on as a tribute, so excited for that too. Because I have so much time to play video games.
Right? Yeah. It just cuts into sleep at this point, right? Like,
who needs sleep?
No, yeah, I don't get so much sleep these days. I hear myself. So yeah, this week we kind of, since rookie drafts are all the rage and everyone's talking about rookies and all the values and everything is going on with rookies, so we kind of wanted to touch base with our personal favorite rookies and the ones we are not a big fan of after the draft and all the landing spots. So we can let Scott. We'll just kick it off and we'll bring up your first guy.
All right. So this is we're talking. I think we're each taking at least one rookie that we think are overvalued and that we think are undervalued. And for me, I'm starting with my overvalued wide receiver. And that's Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. There's plenty to like about Mingo. He was one of the only big-bodied receivers in this draft. And he also ran a 4.46, which gave him, I think, out of all the drafted receivers, I think he had the highest relative athletic score provided by Math Bomb over there. So plenty to like. But I just think he's going too high. I think him going as the wide receiver 5 in rookie drafts, I just think that's too high. There's a pretty somewhat consensus top 4 receivers with JSN, Addison, Quentin Johnson, and Zay Flowers. That's in whatever order you want to put them in. Those are typically the first 4 receivers that are going in rookie drafts. But for me, Mingo as the 5th, it's just too high. And there's fair amount of reasons. Again, there is some stuff to like, but there's red flags analytically. He's not an early declare. So, and none of these things I'm going to talk about by themselves are like, oh, he's this, so he can't be good. It's not like it's the combination of all of it. So he's not early declare. He's 22 years old. His college production profile wasn't special. It's not all about touchdowns and yards, but you can't ignore the fact that there's nothing jumping off the page there. If you look at the boys over at Reception Perception, not a very good success rate against any kind of coverage in college. He was 36th percentile or lower in success rate versus man, zone, press man. So that's a bit of a red flag. He is fast. 4.46 at 6'2", 220 is fast, and it's got the Ole Miss comps turning out with AJ Brown and DK Metcalf. But his success rate on deep style routes, post corner 9 routes, was also not great in college. And a fast, big-bodied guy, I would expect to win down the field more than he did. So I just don't think there's other rookies. One of them I'm going to be talking about in a second. There's other rookies I would be taking ahead of him because he's, like I said, he's wide receiver 5 off the board in rookie drafts. In startup drafts that have now are fully underway with rookies included. He's startup according to Bulletproof ADP. 10.03, so 10th round wide receiver 42. I'm not going to, it's harder probably for the viewer or listener for that to mean anything, but it will once I talk about my other player and talk about some of the other receivers that are in that range in startups that I would be taking over Mingo.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, right? Like, because you can't see the visual picture of the board, but when you kind of put names to it and then you see who he's going ahead, then they kind of get a better understanding of like what exactly he's going ahead over.
And startup drafts are just a wild circus, just a wild adventure. They're so much fun, but they're so volatile. So looking at it especially from a rookie draft angle is probably more effective.
Yeah, like this time of the year, like rookies are all the rage, so guys will get boosted up where in a few months, if we don't hear the hype on them, then they kind of cool down. So yeah, it's 100% right.
I will say, again, with the positives for Mingo, he went a lot higher in the NFL draft than I think anybody expected him to. So you can't knock that. That is the NFL telling us something. Right. So I'm not just completely fading this guy, based on the things I'm talking about. I like a few other receivers better.
That's completely fair.
One of the points with Mingo is, that draft capital plus the wide receiver room in his team, right? So people are saying, grasping a straw, saying he's got the best chance outside the top 4 to crack the starting lineup.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I think he will be fantasy relevant for sure. And I think especially first half of all these wide receivers rookie years, I think, if I had him and he started out the gate pretty hot, I'd be looking to sell high on him just because I think the other receivers from a talent perspective, even though they have more competition, are going to overtake him. It's tricky when you're comparing between dynasty and redraft because talking redraft, who cares about their second year? We're talking about right now. But in dynasty, I just, it's not necessarily that I think Marvin Mims or Zay Flowers are going to outscore this guy weeks 1 through 8. But over the course of the first season, especially over the course of the first few, I do think they overtake him.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And from your dynasty perspective, how do you normally play? Do you pay in what we call like the traditional 3-year window, or is it more basically like league to league setting for you?
It's somewhat league to league. I'm still relatively new to dynasty, to be honest. I jumped in this thing 2.5 years ago, like I said, and prior to doing that, I had never even read a dynasty article. So, and I'm willing to admit it, but I feel like I've come a long way, and I love it. It's so much fun. Just being able to continue to talk about fantasy football and research fantasy football all year long. It's like Christmas all year long. You've got the combine, you've got the draft, you've got trades, you've got free agency, you've got all of it, and it all matters. Right. So I would say, though, I probably lean more towards that 3-year. My style seems to have taken, I'm obviously looking for youth. I'm looking for young talent. But I think I tweeted this out yesterday. I think it was too. I was in a startup yesterday and I was the 3rd round and I was faced with Tyreek Hill, who I think is a very good value in the 3rd round, or some younger players that aren't as talented. And I had that decision. I was like, well, do I just only take young guys no matter what? Because I can't then resell Tyreek Hill. He's like buying a used car or buying a car. As soon as I draft him, I'm never going to get the value. But for me, it's like, well, first of all, it's a 3-year window, and I think he's going to be good for at least the next 2. and I'm going to have 85% of the rest of my lineup is going to be youngsters. So so I'm fine. I look for that value. Like one guy, he went right before I was able to pick him, but one guy that's just been tumbling in startups is Joe Mixon, and it's like he's tumbling. And I get it. You don't want to take Joe Mixon in the third round of a startup, but he's sixth, seventh round, like all over that. I mean, so it's just, but that's kind of the beauty of Dynasty, I think, is you have that freedom to choose how you want to do that. And there's a million voices out there that are going to tell you which way is right and which way is wrong. But I like being able to determine that for myself, with the advice of all the people that have been doing this for a long time.
Right. And it can be so league specific sometimes, because you'll be in leagues where it's like quote unquote all data analysts, and guys will just absolutely fade players like Mingo until like the third round, where you don't even have to take him super early because they're so scared of his profile, right? So and then you get your home league and people are like, oh yeah, like the wide receiver one for Carolina, and they take him like 110. So it's so interesting how like those pockets of Dynasty completely change everything from league to league sometimes.
Yeah. And just like Scott, I started Dynasty 2.5-3 years ago myself. I was redraft up until that point, and it opened up a whole different world. But I loved your analogy of Tyreek Hill and the old car and depreciation. That's definitely going to be a future topic on this podcast where we synergize the two. So that's
but it's like the way I see it, it's like, okay, so I have a few players on my team that it's like, because I think what gets lost sometimes in Dynasty is like in the scramble to accumulate future picks and sell high and buy low is the like, I want to win like this week. I want to win this year. I still want to win. Yeah. So somebody like Tyreek Hill, I just made a decision. It's like, okay, if something comes along where I can get, what will be at that time good value for him, great. If not, I'm going to ride him into the sunset. And that's just one slot on my team that's going to happen. Again, I spent a third round pick in a startup, so that's not cheap.
No.
But he's a perennial top 5 guy, and he's still going to be one.
Right. So, and his daddy was off the charts last year. He was like over 3 yards per out run.
And I feel like I've never this kind of went into it too. This goes into it with me in both type styles. I don't think I've ever really had him on a team. Dude, so I was just like, you know what?
He's a lot of fun.
I'm taking the freak.
Yeah, it's like it's really fun to have that positional advantage. Like before last year started, when he moved on to Miami, I got a little worried and I sold him, and I was very happy with the package, but the package was freaking Elijah Moore and Rashad Bateman. And like, what is that doing for me right now? Right. So it's like, yeah, like youth's great and all, but it can seriously backfire.
And I mean, believe me, one thing I love about Dynasty, because, I've been in the same couple home leagues since like 2006 and kind of quite a while ago, people just stopped trading with me. Like it's just one, like me and 2 other guys that really ever trade. Nobody else really trades. So I think I overcorrect a little bit in Dynasty. Like the startup I was in yesterday, I made some, I think, pretty reckless trades to move up and get guys that I probably could have just waited and gotten. But you know what? That's part of the fun for me. And the beauty of Dynasty is I'm not going to know if I'm wrong or right for a while.
Right. It's usually like a 3-year window before you know if you win or lose on a trade, anyways. All right. So let's jump onto the guy you're over the market on compared to everybody else.
So yeah, over the market on Marvin Mims, Oklahoma Sooner going to the Broncos. The first thing I want to say is more qualitative, and I think it shouldn't be ignored. Now, granted, the Denver Broncos did not have a lot of picks, especially early on, because our Seahawks, had those picks. But I don't think it should be ignored that Sean Payton's, and I know he's not the only one making the pick, but I'm just going to say it like this. Sean Payton's first pick in a draft as the head coach of the Denver Broncos was Marvin Mims. I think that says a lot. Now, again, he was the last pick of the second round. So when you say second round draft capital, somebody might be like, well, but it's like, I don't care. It's still the second round draft capital. You look at the numbers, it's just significantly better than if you get into not as much round 3, but after day 2. So he's got that. He checks a lot more of the boxes for me with his college production profile. And the reason I chose these 2 is because I think these 2 are a debate. Who are you taking, Mims or Mingo? I think that's going to be a common debate over the next, because Mims walks into a situation with a lot more competition. He's got Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick's coming back. So he definitely has a lot more competition. So I'm not expecting Marvin Mims to, in redraft leagues, if he goes undrafted, to be this waiver wire darling early on in the season. He's a little bit more long term. But like I said, he just checks more of the boxes. He was early declare. Breakout age of 19. Mingo was 21. Second round draft capital, like we said. He's only 21. He's young. He didn't jump off the page with like market share statistics in college. I think he had a best season target share like just above 20, which is good, but not great. But he was very efficient. He had a very high targets per route run, hog rate. And then, the list kind of goes on and on. He's very good after the catch. He had I think third highest best season yards after the catch per reception. And that's a stat I really like. I look at because I just think Yak is an indicator of talent. It's not getting tackled after you catch the ball. And that's, when you boil it all down, that's what you want. You don't want to get tackled. So I look at that one. What's a little bit strange about Mims is he was in the slot more than 50% of the time, but he ran a lot of deep stuff out of the slot. He ran a lot of 9 routes out of the slot. So it's a little bit bizarre when you look at his slot rate of above 50%. But he was the highest yards per catch. And he had a very high ADOT, average depth of target, which is not common for people that are in the slot more than 50% of the time. But what it shows me is I think he's going to be versatile. It's going to be between him and Tim Patrick, in my opinion. Jerry Jeudy, 2 years ago, he was 75% slot rate. He was the slot guy. But last year, after Patrick's injury, because Patrick's more, Sutton's out wide, and he's going to be out wide. Mims isn't taking Sutton's role. But last year, Jeudy had to kind of do both. His slot where it went way down because Tim Patrick was gone, and he was kind of lining up more all over the field. I think Mims and Jeudy are going to both be lined up all over the field. I think Mims is going to end up eating into Tim Patrick's time is what I think is going to happen. So, and then if you look at his success rates, he was high success rates on deep routes. I'm not a film guy, but I've watched some tape, and what I can tell is he's very good at contested catches. He's very good at going up and getting the ball, high pointing it, and getting the ball when in traffic down the field. And he's fast, 4.38. It just, there are a lot more boxes that get checked. So he's going, I think you have it up there, right? 209.
Yeah, that's the latest update. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like for me, I kind of almost flip-flop these two guys. Like for me, after you get past the top 4, personally, it's between this guy and Downs. Those are my next two that I'm probably going to flip-flop between the two. And they're somewhat similar players. So, and then I'll circle back to startups. So in startups, he's going in the 12th round, wide receiver 51. So Mingo's wide receiver 42 and Mims is wide receiver 51, and they're 2 rounds apart. And the people that are going ahead of Mims are Juju, Elijah Moore, Lockett, Rashee Rice, Gabe Davis, Kadarius Toney, Downs, and Mingo. There's a fair amount of receivers I just named that I'm going to be in Dynasty. I'm going to be taking Mims over. So I just think he's undervalued, and I think if it stays this way, he's the guy you should target.
Yeah, especially like that late in the second round of rookie drafts, because at that point you're getting past all of the quote unquote surefires, where it's basically like the guy with good profile, good situation.
I've kind of fallen in love with 3 different of the same type of receiver in the second round. It's Downs, it's Jaden Reed, and it's Mims. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Part of me with Mingo thinks like the reason he went higher is because somebody was just like, oh my God, it's a big guy, draft him. You know what I mean? Because there's so many like 5'10", 5'11", sub 200-pound guys in this draft. But if you look at the numbers, and I dug into it, and I looked way back and looked at the trend as far as average weight, average height, average slot rate, all that stuff is going in the direction of smaller receivers, and it has been for the last 10 years. So it's just not being 5'11", 185 or 90, whatever Mims is, that is not a knock any longer.
Right. Yeah, like there's not too many quote unquote like Drake London size players where that's the prototypical build anymore. You're seeing a lot smaller guys come into the league and be good. So like I think we kind of need to shift our perspective in Dynasty on how we treat wide receivers that are small.
Yeah, we don't need to. And I'm not taking Mingo because he's big. It's not that. It's just it's the flip side. It's it's the same with somebody like Devin a Kane.
Yes, sir.
How do you say it?
Yep. Yeah, it's a chain.
A chain. I feel like him and Gibbs, I think, are both going to be guys where down the road from this year, they're going to be the outliers we're kind of looking back at. Like, who can be the next chain? Because we're always comping. We're always like, who's going to be, Gibbs is going to be Jamal Charles. Oh, he's going to be Alvin Kamara. But I don't forget that.
Yeah, that's like the new generation's version.
The amount of times a sub 200 guy has gone 12th overall at running back, there's just no sample size there. He's already the outlier. Right. He hasn't taken a snap yet. He's already the outlier. So,
yeah, that's how I feel about a chain. Like I love that little guy, and I get it. He's an outlier, but you know that going into the process. So it's like we're not.
He was my most recent pick in my startup, and I was very excited to get him.
He's fantastic. He's fantastic. I'm excited for him.
You made a great point, Scott, with Saad Payton picking Mims in the last pick of the second round. But it kind of reminds you of when he picked Michael Thomas in the second round, way back when at the 47th pick. I mean, obviously, two different types of receivers and whatnot, but Saad Payton does know what he likes in his offense, and he gets the players that he wants in his offense. And there's been speculation all offseason that Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy get traded off. So we know their time in Denver is limited. So Mims will be the favorite starting next year.
Well, and I mean, it's a whole different projection if one of those guys gets traded before the season starts.
Yeah,
then it's it's become very cliche, but it's wheels up for Marvin.
Yeah, you're just taking the roller coaster ride to the top. Yeah,
it really will.
Yeah, it's interesting. He had I was hearing today that he had Kenny Stills, the 5th round pick, who they drafted in one of the years, and then the next year they brought in Brandon Cooks in the 1st round. And he doesn't have the profile of Brandon Cooks because Brandon Cooks' profile is freaking absurd. Like, people need to realize that. But
Brandon Cooks,
his profile is off the freaking. He had like 1,700 yards his junior year. Like, he was a stud. But like, people are like making that comparison and like he's gonna play a similar role to Cooks. And I was like, yeah, I can see some of that. I just think it's a little getting out in front of our skis. If we're like, yeah, he's gonna be Brandon Cooks, I'm like, let's slow the roll a little bit. But the hype's on him, so like I completely get it. And he's got a good profile. So it's more if you're just willing to take that bet and bet on the talent in the good situation, where that's usually what works in Dynasty. So like I'm all for Mims at that price. Like, I have no issue with him there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll pull the trigger there too. All right. So I am going to jump onto my guy that I'm fading, and Seahawks fans, close your eyes. Like, I'm sorry to do this to you so early, but like, it's Zach Charbonnet. Like, one of the things about Charbonnet that was so appealing coming out was his receiving profile, where he hit like 13% target share. He's going to a Seahawks offense where that's not really going to be an option, and he would need to be the lead back to get all of those targets, right? But now you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's going to play the slot a lot. He's going to be on the field a lot. Not to mention we have DK. We still have Tyler Lockett. Oh, yeah, and then there's Ken Walker. So I just don't get, like, his price. Like, he's still a late first-round pick in rookie drafts, and that's just – it's terrifying. Like, he has a good profile. He was very productive at UCLA. It took him a while to get there. He changed his body, and you saw, like, him become one of the better backs in the class. But I have serious reservations about him being at this price, and particularly in startups where he's going in the 9th round. And you look on – we'll use the bulletproof ADP. He's going ahead of Devin Achane. Like, I get it. It's 2nd round versus 3rd round. But still, like, 3rd round hit rates are pretty good for running backs. Aaron Jones, James Cook. Like, you can make a case for Kendra Miller. And, oh, yeah, like Alvin Kamara. He's, like, a full round behind him. So there's a lot of guys who are actually going to give you production in the short term. Where Zach Charbonnet, I saw the appeal of him being, quote-unquote, like, an injury away. But, like, if that's where you're putting your money on an early first, like a late first-round pick, like, I'd rather take a chance on someone who has actual like start like day one upside. So I have reservations with Charbonnet. He was my RB3, but he was right there with the chain. It was like a chain was 4, and then Roshan was 5 for me going into the process. I liked all of them, and I still like Charbonnet, but I just don't see a scenario where he pays off at his cost unless we get an injury from Walker. But I will say the Seahawks did draft Charbonnet because he does pair well with Walker. So, like, he does things that Walker can't do. Like, we saw the thing that blew up on Twitter was JJ was talking about he had the lowest success rate of all running backs with 100 carries in the league last year, which meant he's a boom bust running back, which he totally is. Charbonnet, that's not Charbonnet. Like, he will get the yards. Grinder. Yeah, he's a grinder. He kind of takes a while to get going, and then his speed kicks in. So it's kind of weird watching him, but he's a good back. It's just I don't particularly want to pay that cost for him. And I would be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on, are you willing to pay that cost for Charbonnet? What do you think he's valued? And how do you see him moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I love him. I actually had him second in my running back before the draft happened and Gibbs went ridiculously high to the Lions.
So
and then, DeAndre Swift getting traded the next day. So obviously you had to move Gibbs up. But Charbonnet as a pure runner reminds me of Nick Chubb. And the landing spot is just terrible. But I will say this. I think the volume, it's going to be 50-50. Seattle's still going to want to run the ball, even though they drafted JSN. And I think once Charbonnet gets on the field and you see him wearing down the Rams and our Cardinals defense, the coaches will play him more and more in November and December. And he could be a league winner come around that time. But I totally get it. It's one of the worst landing spots. I was personally hoping, even as a Ravens fan, I was really wanting him to go to Cleveland Browns as the successor to Nick Chubb.
That would be really fun. Like that could be. I mean, yeah, because you get Deshaun Watson's offense, and it's wheels up for him at that point after City year. But that could be really fun.
Yeah, that was my perfect landing spot for Charbonnet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's not really any way to spin it that. Well, first of all, you can't spin it that it was a good landing spot. I tried. I looked at a lot of stuff because I wanted to try, but because I'm a big Seahawks fan, I will say, just side note, as a Seahawks fan of normal, regular real life football, I love it. I mean, they just blended like their offensive skill positions. I think right now is a perfect blend of veterans and young guys, and they've got a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 3 who could be a team's wide receiver 1, in my opinion, who doesn't need to come in and be that right away. Same with Charbonnet. I think, let's say Kenneth Walker wasn't there, he could come in and be any team's running back 1 with his 3 down skill set. So, but in fantasy football, yeah, he's just. I think I'm still a little bit higher on Charbonnet and Walker than most. I see both of their, whatever Charbonnet's potential ceiling would have been had he gone somewhere. I mean, just like hypothetically, I don't know if it would make sense, but let's say he's the one that went to Miami. Holy crap.
Yeah, that'd be.
So that ceiling's gone. Kenneth Walker's ceiling is somewhat gone. But Kenneth Walker wasn't really getting catches anyway, so that wasn't really part of the ceiling. What I think it's going to boil down to between these two, I think it will be close to a 50-50 split. I think it'll still be Walker, at least early on. And obviously either of them becomes a smash if the other one gets hurt. I'm curious to see who's going to get goal line work between these two.
That's the key.
I honestly think it might be Charbonnet that gets the goal line. Because
could be,
along with the success rate thing that late round QB brought up, was I think he also led the league in being tackled for 1 yard or less or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of running into walls and then some big plays with Walker.
Right.
And that's summarizing a little too much. Walker, that's the thing too. Walker is a fantastic running back. His college production profile is amazing. So I think the fade on Walker has gone a little too far. Same startup I'll keep because it's fresh in my mind. I got sniped in the 4th or 5th round. Guy right before me grabbed Walker, and at that point, with the running backs that were, there had already been a pretty big tier break in that draft from where he should have been drafted, and he was still there.
Yeah,
so I made a trade. Like I was like I reversed the snipe. I was like, screw that. I'm getting him anyway. That's what I mean by reckless. Like, I don't know. The pick I gave up later, because now we're getting to the point of the draft where I'm like, oh, there's that pick I don't have.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's about getting the guy that you want.
Walker is still a top level dynasty running back right now, even with this. Because I mean, that's the thing is one, it's the Seahawks. And that's the thing. If Charbonnet was going to go to a team with an established starter, his best scenario was the Seahawks. If that was going to be where he went, the Seahawks are the best opportunity for both these guys to succeed. Like I said, I just think neither of them are going to have this, top 5 necessarily season.
No, yeah, I could see them being kind of similar to Cleveland, like when they had Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb going, where like Chubb's the low end RB1 and Kareem Hunt's like a mid RB2. Like you could see something like that.
It'd be like that, or it could be
yeah.
similar but without all the pass catching. But
yes,
Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon type of thing.
Yeah. I actually think that the Packers is a little bit more dead on because of the scheme that St. Waldron's going to bring. It's going to be very similar to the Packers. The Cleveland Browns are a total outlier. Up until last year, I used to write these explosive articles on the league winners, and then the data stopped generating. But Cleveland Browns for the past 3 years were the most explosive run unit 3 years in a row. Like that
makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of propped up Kareem Hunt's numbers as well.
Yeah, that's what Walker was still really good at, was those explosive runs. And they bolstered the O-line. Like it was a little bit later, but they did bolster the O-line this year. So I'm not saying like completely fade Walker or completely fade Charbonnet, but at the current cost, because I think Walker's still going in the third round of Dynasty startups, and that's where you're getting the truly elite talent still. So like that's where I'm like, we got to tone it down a little bit. And Charbonnet in the 9th, like that's just a little too rich for me. If we're talking in like the 5th, which that's great. And if we're getting Charbonnet like behind those starting running backs that are older, we're pushing in the 11th round. Like I'm fine pulling the trigger there. It's just at his current cost, I more want to see how it plays out. But realistically, like he's going to be valuable and he's still going to serve a role. It's just without the upside, I would rather chase other players with better, like more a foreseeable upside.
Right.
Agreed.
All right, and we're gonna get to Mr. Reed. Yeah, like the hype train on Reed has been going since the Senior Bowl, where he was basically like he was the guy everyone came away talking about. I know Mingo went ahead of him in the draft, but like if you ask people who were down there, like they love Jaden Reed. Like he was going against first round corners, and it really like he was one of the guys succeeding even with terrible QB play. So this kind of brought him into my attention as to like, hey, who is this guy? Let's take a look. He has the earliest breakout age in the entire wide receiver class. Now that's something to like, hey, guess what? Like if you break out early, that usually is a good sign. Now he did end up transferring to Michigan State, but I think the interesting thing with him is as a freshman, he outproduced D. Eskridge, and then he had better numbers than Sky did the following year because Sky came in after he transferred to Michigan State and went to Western Michigan, and it didn't matter. Like he had better numbers than Sky Moore, who's a second round pick for the Chiefs. So we know like Jaden Reed is a good player, and he fell into like the ideal landing spot. Like let's be real. It's a second round pick, but like you go to the Packers, and I love Christian Watson. Like I'm a big Christian Watson fan, but still outside of him, there isn't much. So realistically, like he can come in and he can play day one. And if you're getting the second round draft capital, like that matters. It's not first round draft capital, which is like all important, but second round draft capital is still good for a wide receiver. And then you go to Green Bay with a really open place. Like I am very interested to see how it works out for him. He did perform at Michigan State. He did end up switching roles where he went outside and his production dipped because he was learning a new role. So it was interesting to see because I was listening to Peter Howard talk about that, and I was like, oh, that makes sense why I did not go 1-for-1. So to throw a little context into the stat argument, that's why his numbers fell off. And then the year later, his numbers kicked back up where he was being the stud in that passing offense. So I don't really have issue. And at the 12th round, like we're really pushing it with these guys. Like if you look at where Jaden Reed is ranked in here in the 12th round, like we have guys like he's going a full round behind Mims. He's going behind Sutton. He's going behind Jalen Hyatt, which I don't fully understand why he's going behind Jalen Hyatt. But there's all these guys. And then, of course, there's Tyler Lockett. So that one's a little interesting where I'm like, oh, I do love Tyler Lockett. But you're not paying premium capital for him at all. And in rookie drafts, like I have him ranked much higher than he's going. He was the 205 for me. And in rookie drafts, he's going 302. And in the third round, the hit rates are abysmal. So I'm happily smashing the button in the third round him on any time. Because like if you look at hit rates for just an average third round pick, they're so low. Take the guys with the good profiles. It's going to be a good hit. So the wide receiver 10, I'm all in on Jaden Reed with the Packers. So I'm very curious to see how it works out. But he's going to get on the field day one. And that's the first step in the hopefully a successful career for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with this guy. Like I said it earlier, he's one of my small slot style wide receivers along with Mims and Downs. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy I'll credit where credit's due very early in the offseason. JJ Zacharyson was talking up Jaden Reed before. I didn't even know who he was when I heard Jade. So I want to give that credit. I mean, because might not be a mystery, but JJ's, he's probably my favorite analyst. I consume every single thing he does. Has been for a while. So when he brings people up, I listen. But being an analyst myself, it creates a list for me to then go do my own research on. So then I did that with this youngster. Keep saying that word. And he's another guy like Mingo, who I think went way earlier in the NFL draft than at least I was expecting. When I don't do a lot of mock draft stuff for the real NFL draft, I don't really go past the first round with what I'm researching. I just don't have the time. But I do know I don't think he was mocked to go where he went. So the draft capital, and I agree, the landing spot. It's Christian Watson, I think, is their wide receiver 1. I think this guy will flick Romeo Doubs off like a mosquito. They did also draft, a couple other receivers later, and then a couple pretty good tight ends.
Yep.
So it's not like it's just going to be, Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. But I think he has a path to immediate playing time in Green Bay. I mean, jury's still out on how good Jordan Love is. So, I mean, we'll see.
Right.
The optimist in me wants Jordan Love to work out, and also the fantasy football player in me wants him to work out. But with Reed, I mean, I think by his second year, he could be leading this team in targets and receptions. He's that type of high volume, kind of middle of the field guy. College production profile, like he's not top 5 in any of the typical metrics you look at, but he's top 10. You know what I mean? So it's like and that's why we're not talking about this guy as a first round rookie pick. I've started to see him go in the second in rookie drafts. I was really hoping he'd fall to the third in mine, but he did not. He went in the second. So I think word's kind of getting out on this guy. But I think he has a path to fantasy relevance immediately.
Yeah, I was in one of my leagues. The guy was on the clock at 210, and Jaden Reed was the top pick available. And he goes, "Anybody send me a future second?" And I'm like, "Deal done. Like, let's make this happen." So yeah, I was like, I'm got to get him. Like, I've missed out on him in almost every league, and I'm like, all right, I got to get him at least one of my.
I mean, a future second, even for the 210.
Yeah, right.
It's at any day of the week. I mean,
right, and you're just betting on your team at that point.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just bet on my team. If it works out, if it doesn't, oh well, it's still second round pick.
And you know what? You got a whole year to get that second back.
Right. Exactly. And I will say, Jaden Reed also is very dynamic. Like he also has like return ability, and like he saw some rushing attempts too. So they might be able to integrate him more. I know they have that with Watson kind of already, but it just gives them another dynamic playmaker they can find ways to scheme him on the field too.
Yeah, and I think Reed reminds me of Jarvis Landry, right? He's going to be that under guy, heavily targeted, especially with Jordan Love, who doesn't have that much experience. He could turn into the Landry and the Cooper Kupp for Love, his security blanket. So we'll see how that plays out, but I totally agree. And I'm seeing that too. I think Reed's stock is just going up.
Yeah, if we get some camp hype on him, like it'll just take off. Like that's how Dynasty works these days. If you get one article on one of these guys, it's just like
just one slow motion catch with sweatpants on. They jump around.
Look at George Pickens last year. Like he took off, and everybody's like, "Oh, here's the wide receiver 1." We're like, "All right, calm down a little bit."
Calm down. He does that. Pickens did. He makes some catches, but just not.
Yeah, that's the
not consistently.
Right. All right, Prue, do you want to jump into your guys?
Definitely.
All right.
I'm going to keep this train going. I'm going to pick a player from my favorite team, the Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately, as a fantasy analyst and a Baltimore fan, I know my Baltimore inside and out. Zay Flowers, I think in the rookie draft, he's probably not overvalued. He's probably going where he needs to be going, the top 4 wide receivers. But it's the startup ADP that I'm concerned with. He's going ahead of Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, and Hollywood Brown, who already have exhibit wide receiver 1 points per game capability, right? I mean, there was a graphic out last week on Twitter that showed that McLaurin had 100 targets, and that totally was something that wasn't at the top of my mind. I keep forgetting that he was heavily targeted last year in that abysmal Redskins offense. So there's no way I'm picking Flowers over the likes of those three. Purely based on two things. Those are proven wide receivers. We know what we're getting with them. Zay Flowers is entering a new offense with a quarterback entering a new offense as well. He's going to have very high boom or bust weeks. He's a great basketball receiver, but I don't want him in redraft. Especially in the Ravens offense. I know, the passing for the Ravens will increase, but he's competing with Andrews and Bateman. Obviously, if Bateman is injured, Flowers, reels up. But if all three are, healthy, then it's a week-to-week boom or bust. And that's my only knock on him is I think he's going probably a round or a round and a half too high in startups for my taste. With players like Hollywood Brown and Amari Cooper and T-Mac available. I think I'm picking him after Jahan Dotson, who I think is a better wide receiver 2 on the Redskins than Zay Flowers is a wide receiver 2 on the Ravens.
Okay. Your cutoff is basically around the eighth round, because that's kind of where Dotson's going. It looks like
pretty much.
Okay.
So he's like about a round or round and a half too high for my taste at the moment. In startups.
I did trade for Zay Flowers. The pick that was Zay Flowers, the 201 in one league, because I'm stacked at wide receiver and Hollywood's never going to play for me. So I sent Hollywood for the 201, just basically trying to play the value gain game with Zay Flowers if he gets the hype, and then ride it out or flip it. But ideally, I do prefer Hollywood in most of my leagues. But I had the most stacked wide receiver core where he was never going to play. So I was like, well, let's take a gamble and see what happens with him.
Yeah, him and 2-on-1's not bad.
Yeah, it's just
let's do Flowers. Out of all these top level receivers, he's probably the guy I've researched the least, and I don't really know why. I don't have a reason why, but he's got a great college production profile.
Mm-hmm.
He's got excellent success rate stats at reception perception, but the landing spot is a little bit concerning because everybody wants to say, and me included, when people are on Twitter or whatever saying, "Oh, it's the Ravens, this, and that," it's like, well, Roman's gone. Mm-hmm. He's gone. But that doesn't automatically mean the new guy who I'm just blanking on his name right now.
Todd Monken.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to come in and just reverse everything. And history shows that teams that, like two good examples would be the Falcons and the Bears, who ran the ball 150% of the time last year or whatever it was. And obviously that's going to regress back towards a more balanced offense, but the amount that is possible to regress positively, it just that's one of the concerns you have with Falcons pass catchers. Mm-hmm. is it would take so much to get to where the market share size mm-hmm. is comparable with some of these other receivers or tight ends or pass catchers, who are getting just peppered with targets. Right. So it's similar in Baltimore. Like, how much can they and how quickly can they adapt to a new offensive coordinator? I've always been a huge Lamar fan, and I still am. I got him in this startup. I'm talking about at the 109. I was very happy he fell all the way to the 109.
Oh my goodness!
Because then I could take a quarterback. Because at 109, you're like, well, I'm going to have to make that decision. Mm-hmm. Am I going to take one of these next tier quarterbacks, or do I take a Bijan, or do I take a receiver? So when he was still there, I was like, oh, that made it easy. But it's just I struggle with the rookies between him and Quentin Johnston as far as who I would rather have, because Johnston has red flags too. JSN, Addison locked and loaded at the first two. They have been for me for quite some time. I think Addison is going to be a fantasy force from day one in Minnesota, but these, him and Johnston. So I'm okay with him, the overvalued tag being put on Zay Flowers.
Yeah,
I would take two of the receivers you mentioned over him. I don't know if I would take Hollywood Brown over him at this point.
Yeah, it's like with Flowers, it's just a bet on talent because he can legit play all three positions of the wide receiver. Like, he can play everywhere, He doesn't have to be. He can beat press. Like he can win down the field. He can win short. He can win intermediate. It's legit a veteran talent, and we sometimes.
I mean, the Antonio Brown comps have been tossed out with this guy,
which is wild. It's just wild. Like you're gonna bring up a 6th round wide receiver.
I also get the for the longest time as a Seahawks fan, I would never end up with Seahawks players on my fantasy teams because I knew so much about the team. I was like, no, they're not worth that. Like,
yeah,
I had watched that so closely, so it sounds like it's similar with you and Flowers.
Yeah, like I really like Flowers, but yeah, I had to drop. I had him at 3, but I had to put Addison above him. Like I couldn't not do that just because Lennox was too good. So I was like, yeah, and like with QJ, for me, it's just like he's a deep threat with Yak, and he has the strangest like analytical profile you'll see. Like
It's
the
so
stuff
weird.
It's so weird, and he's a big body guy. Like there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad with him.
But he
so
did.
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
depending on the health of Mike Williams, Johnston did go to a very good place.
He's fascinating.
A very good quarterback to hopefully be able to get past some of his red flags.
Right, like it could be wheels up. You don't know,
and not be Laviska Chenault.
Oh god,
no, I think it's not going to be that. I
think it's for Laviska.
Oh, yeah, for Laviska. But yeah, my undervalued are. I'm actually going with 2 running backs with a very, very low ADP in both rookie drafts and restarts. And the reason I chose both of these is I think they fit a profile, especially in redraft and even in dynasty if you're a contender, is they go to a landing spot that has a pure number 1 running back, right? But we already know the Bengals and the Vikings are already interested in sipping Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. So you could see that kind of trade either happen, if some other team's starting running back goes injured in the offseason and they get moved, or during the season like CMC. But what I'm really betting on is I think one of them gets injured, right? Dalvin Cook is not the most healthiest. Mixon is getting there up in touches. He's going to slow down. And I really think the teams are going to want to see what they have in these 2 running backs. And we've all known for years that 2023 is a loaded running back class. And that is one of the reasons the draft capitals for these running backs was later than what most had assumed. So I am throwing draft capital out at that point, and I'm banking on talent here. I think they could be similar to what Tyler Algier was with Falcons, where he caught on at the end of the season because either through injury or pure talent, or the player gets traded. I still believe Cook is high up on the list of getting traded to a team.
Yeah, his contract is pretty much an albatross, and they've talked about they want to move on basically once we get past June. So it would not surprise me to see him move on, and it gives McBride the perfect shot. Who's, by the way, has one of the best like rushing profiles on here. Like he's a terrible pass catcher. There's no pass catching in his game, but like him as a rusher, like it's very good. And it was lower class like competition he was going against, but like you see the data of him as like a rusher, and you're like, holy smokes, like this dude, like he's a good runner.
Yeah, the more I looked at, I was over at IBT. We end up flag planning on people, rookies. We did it a few years ago with Michael Carter. It didn't work out very well, but Chase Brown has kind of been our guy. He killed the combine. I was hoping for better draft capital. Neither of these guys really has a receiving profile, so we're not really talking about that type of thing. But I think they were both decent early down guys. There was knocks on Chase Brown's pass blocking, so I looked up all the pass blocking, PFF grades. So there's subjectivity there. Right, but he was had the second highest grade in this draft over his career. So take it for what it's worth. McBride, what impresses me about McBride is some of the things he basically was the top guy in this class. Yards per carry, above 7. Yards, basically yards after contact per carry. But the one that also stood out is explosive runs, breakaway runs, 15 plus yard runs. He was also the leader in this class in those types of runs, either the percentage of his yards that comes from those runs, if you look at it that way, or those types of runs per attempt. He was top. And it wasn't based on a small sample size. He got a lot of work. So he hits enough of the boxes for me that he is like him, Chase Brown, and Zach Evans. Those are the three guys for me that are like mid third round and on. Those are the dart throws I like to take. Chase Brown and Dwayne McBride, like you said, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon could easily be gone later. There's some weird hype springing up about Alexander Madison. Not really sure where it's coming from. I think when he's had the job when Dalvin Cook's been hurt, he's been pretty good. And again, it's already a leap to say the 7th round running back Dwayne McBride is going to overtake and become, a lead back. But I do agree, and that's a good point about the depth of the running backs pushing draft capital to where it's not quite representative of what we've seen. And with Zach Evans in LA, like I'm not a big Cam Akers guy, never have been. He's a little bit more of a dart throw just because what the hell happened with Zach Evans? But anyway,
yeah, he's smaller than we thought.
These are two big time late round rookie targets for me, both these guys.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it works out for McBride because like once Cook goes, then he has a shot to at least start playing. Like he could be the backup. Like I mean, he's got Kene Nwangwu, who's he's a kick return dude. He's nothing special, but there's Ty Chandler there, so he could literally leapfrog both of them. Like you don't know, and then an injury, and that's how he gets on the field, and then that's how you get that profit. And you can
I mean, his receiving profile isn't in Minnesota. Every time I look at the numbers, I'm always surprised by how should I put this? I always think Dalvin Cook gets more receiving work than he has in his career.
It's weird. It's really weird. Like you think
picture him as like up there with those, but it's like his target share, his targets, receptions. It's not anything special.
Yeah, he's like a kind of like Aaron Jones, but just like not as not as good, but like per touch wise, like it's the same. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Like you would think he would be up there, but he's just not.
He definitely has. I think it's more highlight reels with Cook where he takes that screen pass and then takes it to the house. I think that's what's like burnt into everyone's images. But I don't think he has the volume of someone like Aaron Johns does.
Yeah. And like Cook legit was not good last year. Like he declined dramatically. If you look at his peripherals, like outside of his yards per carry and stuff, like his numbers tanked where it could be like starting to show the wear and tear and he's getting older. And Mixon's never been that efficient. Like he's been a volume guy.
No, he's always been a low yards per carry.
It's so frustrating. Like I can't stand Joe Mixon. Like his expected points, he's like RB1 with expected points, and he just continually lets down. But that's a whole nother story.
But I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Mixon still has that off the field issue, and we don't know what there is. So why not throw a dart at his backup?
Yeah. But yeah, these types of guys are important to look at because the track record for day 3 running backs not good. It's just not. I mean, you can't argue with it. It's not. But again, it's not zero. The average is probably about 1 day 3 running back per year ends up going on to be some level of fantasy relevant. Tyler Algier last year, Elijah Mitchell the year before. But it's important. I mean, we can all flag plant one guy, but I mean, I think for the viewer, for the consumer, it's important to just, go through the process of this is why these are the guys we think fit that they're candidates.
Right.
They're candidates. I'll never forget. I was listening to Ray GQ when I was first getting into Dynasty early that offseason, and he just mentioned the name Elijah Mitchell. And so I looked into him a little bit, and then on the IBT podcast, I brought him up as a sleeper. And I still get credit for it. They're like, Scott nailed that one that year. I was like, well, I just kind of was listening to Ray GQ and he's super smart. So
it's fine. Right? You were just standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yep. That's the way it works.
Did you guys see the Titans GM was talking about Elijah Mitchell where he didn't want to bring up just the data to like Shanahan in San Francisco. So he went up and talked to the film guy, and the film guy basically like concurred, like, yeah, he matches the data. So they went to Shanahan, and then they went to Lynch, and then they ended up taking him over a 6th round like linebacker they were going to take. And they were just talking about like the communication and how I just found it super interesting to see.
That's cool. No, that's
to peel back the layer of how like
I love that behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
That should have been a draft day movie.
Maybe it will be. Draft day 2.
Right? They can talk about the Trey Lance nightmare that's going on.
I still have hope, man. I still have hope.
Me too.
Oh goodness. Is there? I'll just throw this one out there. Is there any other like guys you want to shout out, or any other like rookies you want to fade? Like any other players you guys are interested want to bring up?
There's 2 guys, 2 wide receivers who I've consistently seen fall to the 4th round.
Ooh.
So much so in one of my rookie drafts, I think I traded Paris Campbell for like a mid 4th, which seems like, what are you even doing? But one of them's Tyler Scott, went to the Bears. He's a 4th rounder. So, I mean, he's day 3. Oh, no. He's at the top of day 3. And, you know, there's reasons why he fell to the 4th round. But he's, you know, in Chicago, he also has a path to playing time. Maybe not this year. But, again, as a 4th round dart throw. And then the other one's Michael Wilson.
Yes, I like Wilson.
Because, and that one is very straightforward for me. Like I saw that was the thing. What I did in my rookie draft was I had the 406 and the 405 came up and both Tyler Scott and Michael Wilson were still available. So I was like, it's the 4th round. These guys should not be here in the 4th round. Michael Wilson is a day 2 receiver. Like he should, might not pan out obviously, but that just the risk there is, and then Tyler Scott, he's another guy that I've heard mentioned from people I very much trust with their analysis. I have not looked into him too much compared to how much I've looked into everybody else. Wish I had more time. Me too. But he's another one, a sleeper, if you want to call him a sleeper. So those are 2 guys. If 4th round comes around and you're just throwing darts at Deuce Vaughn, grab one of those guys. Because Michael Wilson, it's like there's nothing sexy there. But it's a guy that could end up, you know, maybe creeping into the wide receiver 3 conversation in a few years, and as a 4th rounder taxi guy,
right? Yeah. And like say Hollywood gets DeAndre Hopkins gets traded, and he has a shot to get on the field right away, like, and he can play. Like, what brought him to my attention was Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. He was raving about him one day, so I started looking into it, and I was like, yeah, the profile's not great, but like I could kind of see what he's talking about. And then with Tyler Scott, Matt Cooper, who is like one of the Devi guys I talked to a lot, he was like raving about him and his breakdown. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, he's like, he's way more than just a deep threat. Like he's really good. And he had him as like wide receiver 6 in his rankings. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to like keep that in mind and take a look at him. So yeah, he went to a spot where he could get on the field and play. And like 4th round, it's like, why the heck not? Like
another 4th round dart throw that I've been doing. And this guy I looked into, I kind of started the very, very, very preliminary process of building a model. Mostly just so I can say, according to my model. No, but I mean, at this point, it's really just trying to go through different metrics and figure out. I don't want the collinearity. I don't want to just put in target share, reception yard share, and like keep adding the same freaking data. I've just been playing around with it. Okay, I've been playing around with it, and one guy in the preliminary stages of that has stood out as far as like is Chris Rodriguez Jr., who went to the Commanders. So I think he was a 6th round guy. Interesting. He stands out in certain metrics. Again, they've got Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson, so it's somewhat crowded, but it's also not necessarily, just ensconced running back room with those guys. And again, I'm talking if you're in the 4th round, you're like, I haven't even heard of these guys. He's just another guy I've been throwing darts at. Yeah,
like, and for me, it's. Like I know Sean Tucker didn't get drafted, but like we chalking that up to medicals.
I was gonna ask you guys who you guys any UDFAs that you're.
Yeah, like he's the guy. Like he didn't have the best metrics, but like he carried a workload and he was running legit like every single route for Syracuse.
It's the injury.
It's just something. Yeah, like you're like that's the whole reason he didn't get drafted because you talk to everybody. He should have been drafted. Like he might not have been like a day 2 guy, but he would have been early day 3, more than likely at least. But it just the medicals killed him. But he got on to Tampa Bay, and there's nothing else. It's Rachaad White, and it's just like the ghost of Keyshawn Vaughn. Like we're talking like nobody important there. So he has a shot to get on and play. And like what's his face? Rachaad White was not that good last year, so he's not going to just dominate all of the touches if Tucker is the guy that we thought he was coming out. So he has a shot. It's it's undrafted guy, so take it with a massive grain of salt. But you're in the 4th, 5th round, like just throw a dart on him. Like it can't hurt.
So this is the problem of having Jesse go in front of me. I was going to say Sean Tucker as well because of the same things Jesse said. But going back to Scott's Mike Wilson, I was actually not that well aware of him until there is a league where we are co-managers with other analysts in the industry. And my co-manager pointed out Mike Wilson in the 4th round because we had 2 back-to-back picks in the 4th round. And he mentioned Mike, and he started, showing me highlights and some stats. And I was like, oh, wow, I could get really behind his opportunity in Arizona and potential there. So, yeah.
And then
I'm a little curious about this Seahawks DFA, Matt Landers.
Yeah, I don't know much.
Only because he's 6'4", 200, and he ran a 4.37. I mean, that's just insane.
It's like you're like big, fast, check. Like, let's take a shot.
But I mean, for all we know, he could just be a guy that, he can run down that field fast, and he looks bigger than everybody, but he can't catch.
Yeah, I will say if you're in Superflex leagues, throw a dart at Clayton Tune. Most people don't know who he is, but he has a chance to be the backup in Arizona. And with Kyler Murray being injured, like, he could play in year 1. And that in Superflex leagues, like, that's a massive value. And he was a very good passer. Like look at his stats. There's definitely stuff to go off of. Like, he doesn't have the best arm strength in the world or anything like that, but he's slaying the rock and put up good numbers. So just keep it in mind if you're looking for a late dart throw.
It's funny. Names keep popping in my head that I want to add to the dart throw list. Like A.T. Perry. I'm like, 6th round, but man, Saints, he could be good.
Well, yeah, I saw your chart you posted the other day of like wide receiver hit rates because we were talking about it in one of the Discord chats, and that thing came up, and I was like, dude, day 3 wide receivers is just atrocious. Like,
well, especially like round 6 and 7, it's 0.
Oh, it's literally because we were talking about who are the hit rates out of like round 5. It's like,
well, because there was a response to that from somebody who was talking about how 8 years wasn't long enough sample size, and that they have data going back 20 years. And I mean, I get it. 8 years isn't not. I mean, could be longer. If you go back just a couple more years, you got Antonio Brown in the 6th, who then makes that not 0%. But I feel like no matter how far you go back, it's still going to be much. It's not going to be good. But it actually sparked an interesting question that I think JJ is going to talk about on his mailbag show tomorrow. Choosing sample sizes, choosing how far back to go. Because for me, like, thinking about it logically, take running backs, for instance. I get it. It's like the urge to be like, well, if I go all the way back to 2002, it'll show everybody how much data I collected. And it's so much data sample size, but it's like from 2002 to a certain point in the team, the NFL does not look like that anymore at all. Running back. So it's like, are you going back far enough to where you actually start to hurt the data because it's not really representative of current times? It was a question I asked. I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, I saw that question and I was like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, I
mean, some of it's based on just available data,
right?
Like, for some reason, like all the college data targets stop at 2014. Kind of sucks, but it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it a little difficult, right? Because you can't go back all the way. Yeah, because they don't. Like, I've done that when I've looked back on players, and I'm like, they don't have target share. Like, I can't look at all information, so it's frustrating. I'm like, well, all right, I guess we'll just go with the receptions, stuff like that. But I'm nowhere near the data or like the data that you have on that. Like, I look at your chart and I'm like, whoa, that is quite impressive information to have.
Yeah, I mean, with the sample size, it's different because NFL changes, right? Different schemes start becoming popular as, people are trying to replicate what the Rams did or what the Chiefs are doing or what the Eagles are doing. So data in the NFL, I feel like, has short bursts, right?
It's like shorter than people think is what.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, gone are the days where you have a bell cow running back. Now you have to have running back by committee.
Well, yeah, because if you go back far enough, you've got like 7 running backs going in the first round of the NFL draft. And it's just like that's not the current thing, So if you're looking at that and the hit rates, that just it's not representative of what we're looking at now. I mean, maybe I'm being defensive about my tweet, but like but to the credit of the debate, because it didn't get hostile or anything, I responded with it's an 8-year sample size. That's how far I went. I'm dubious about going back too far, but then it's sparked the question that apparently JJ got asked a couple times. So he was like, "Yep, I'm going to cover that tomorrow."
Nice.
I'm interested to hear what he has to say because it'll give us some information, like stuff like that. My mind just wanders where I'm like, oh, you know what? I had no idea. I'm very curious, and then I need to know the answer. I'm like, I need to know it. I need to know it now.
And I don't know. I don't exactly know how to find out the answer. I'd love to just go figure it out myself, but I don't exactly know how to go about that. So
Right, because if you had all the data available, you could just pull it, but it's not. So it's like, what do you do?
Cool.
all right.
I think we nailed a lot of players here today.
I think so.
Yeah. But I think there are this is a very interesting class with a lot of talented players going late. So, but Scott, we loved having you on, and all the insight that you brought in.
Yeah, no, I had a blast. I'm glad we were able to make it work. Thanks for postponing from Tuesday.
Oh,
No,
yeah, no
no
problem.
worries.
On my schedule.
My day job's fairly flexible. I kind of get to make my own schedule, but that particular day I had something going. So, but no, man, anytime. I'll come on anytime. I don't guest on many pods, so I'm always thrilled when I get asked.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and rescheduling your plans to come on Thursday because it worked out perfect. So, yeah. It was a pleasure having you on, man. I appreciate it.
All right. See you guys later.
See you, Scott.
See you, Scott. All right. You want to take us into finance now, bro?
You're gonna have to keep running the show.
Okay. I don't have
the ad. We don't.
Oh, sorry. Yes, my bad.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking
about?
Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for educational, entertainment, and informational purposes only. It should not be considered as financial advice, and we strongly recommend that you consult with a licensed financial advisor or professional before making any financial decisions based on the information provided in this podcast.
All right, that's out of the way. Yeah, so today on finance, I know we kind of went over with fantasy football. There was lots to talk about, good conversation. So we're definitely going to keep it short and simple with finance on this episode. But with the discussion of over and under, players in fantasy, one thing that brought up to my mind is life insurance, right? Or any type of insurance, right? You have what are called underwriters, and their whole job is to speculate on your capability or your assets capability to be insured, right? They do not want to over analyze it or be over safe, right? And charge you a high premium because then they're going to be the highest cost on the market and they're going to cost themselves out of sales. People will flock cheaper premiums. But on the flip side, they don't want to underwrite the risk either, where if something were to happen to your house or your car or you, in the case of life insurance, they had to pay out a pretty big amount. So that's what we're going to talk about pretty quickly here is, insurance, there is underwriting it and overwriting it, but life insurance for particular. Jesse, do you have life insurance?
I do. Yes, I do. Yes. I was like, I had to think about it for a second because I didn't remember. Yes, me and my wife have life insurance. We talked about it when we had a kid, so we decided to get it. We did not have it before that. I feel like that happens for a lot of people where they're like, oh yeah, we have a family now. Like, should probably think about worst case scenario, right? So yes, we do.
Exactly. And that's the only time you need life insurance is when you have beneficiaries that you want to make sure are well off or prepared if anything were to happen to you in this world, right? And life insurance is basically a mitigation to risk, right? You buy insurance for your car because you want to cover it if you got into an accident. You want to buy insurance for your house because you want to cover it if a tornado came by. Same thing with life insurance. You want to only buy it if and only if you are concerned that your family, particularly kids, are young, and if something were to happen to you, they are set up financially. And the reason we bring this up in today's podcast is a lot of the times you'll be approached by life insurance clients that will tell you that it's an investment vehicle. It is not an investment vehicle. It is an insurance. But a lot of these life insurance will try to sell you on a higher insurance or a different type of insurance. And in the future podcasts, we're going to have some people that do sell life insurance with two drastically different ideologies come on, so we can see the contrast between the two. So we kind of wanted to tee that up with this conversation was, I know a lot of people in America get approached by these, salespeople, and all they're trying to do is make commission.
Yeah, because it's their job. That makes sense. Yeah, right.
Right. And they make a ton of commission. It's a recurring commission on you, right? Every premium you pay, they get a pay cut. But on the flip side, it's a great side hustle too for you, right? How many family and friends do you know? They may need life insurance.
That makes sense.
Right.
Do you have life insurance? I'm just gonna take a guess.
Yes, I do. So I actually got at one point I had 6 life insurance because I made the mistake of thinking it as an investment vehicle. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book that talked about using life insurance as your own banking system and the benefits of a living benefit, this and that. But then as I started getting deeper into the weeds, it's a lot more hassle. If you cannot afford it, just get rid of it and just condense it down. And that's what we did, was we condensed it down to one on my wife and one on me. Mm-hmm. But there are each life insurance, there are details for each one. And that's how people, the salespeople get you confused. It's because there's so much that goes into this life insurance and they never, ever tell you a complete story. But one of the things we'll be doing here at this podcast is when we get those life insurance people on, we're going to have a free consultation link. So if you have any type of life insurance, you could get a free consultation where we will take your policy, read it, and we will provide you exactly what it says. So you can make the right decision moving forward.
Perfect. So basically working with those life insurance agents, helping people in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be a free consultation. We promise you never ever to try to resell anything. It's all going to be, here are the X's and the O's. Here's the data. We're not going to gear you towards whatever data we're trying to promote. If it's yards per route run or target share, we're just going to say, this is the data. You analyze it and you make the decision.
Just no, you should really go for this package. You're why? Because it's more money for me. Yeah, no.
Right. Believe me, I've sucked into it. Like I said, I had at one point, I think it was not even 6. I think it was 8, to be honest.
That's a lot.
Because I fell into the trap. I looked at all these YouTube channels that people that retired early, they were using that money to buy real estate. But if you're not using the living benefit to your advantage, you're just throwing money away at that point. And I'm not saying life insurance is bad. It's good, right? If you use it correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
Just don't treat it as an investment is basically what you're trying to say.
Right. I mean, you could treat it as an investment, but not like a retirement investment, but more like, I'm going to go build this nest egg because I have the capability of it. And then I'm going to take that money and go buy properties and go rent it out. That's a whole complicated situation. So if you're not going to be doing something that complicated and you just want to store your money away, there's better vehicles out there.
Perfect. Okay. That makes sense.
So, yeah, like I said, short and sweet. And hopefully we teed it up enough that you join us when we do have those people on for the life insurance. And we'll be looking at 2 different types of life insurances and the pros and cons for each. Like I said, we'll work out something where if you have life insurance and you want a free consultation, you'll be able to use our link and it'll be completely free and no pressure because I'll be the one that's going to be the middleman and not the salespeople, right? I'll be the one reviewing it with the client, with the experts and providing the feedback and not trying to sell it on to you.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds like a very smart way to go about going with life insurance, because not honestly, like a lot of families don't have an idea of what they're getting into. So if we can help them in that way, I'm all on board with that.
Right. And with that, stay tuned for our episode 5. We should have Dennis Meckelson at DMIC. Wow, I forget his Twitter handle, but
I think that's it. Let me
right.
see.
There's something at the end I can't remember at the moment.
Yeah, it's DMIC Media.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. DMIC Media. He's actually the analyst. That's my co-manager in the co-analyst draft that we just did,
Nice.
and then the league. So we'll review some decisions that we made, and playing off of each other. But I think it'll be a fun conversation, and he brings a lot of experience in both the fantasy football world, and he's up there in experience in life as well. So he brings a lot of good finance experience as well. He's seen it a lot. He's seen it all.
Perfect. Yeah,
So,
that should be a fun episode.
Yep. And hey, thanks for staying on. I know we ran a little bit over, but hey, when you're talking and having fun talking fantasy football, it tends to happen.
That's life. It's sometimes fun. The clock just speeds up, and then you just realize, hey, we're an hour 20 into this thing. So sometimes that's how it goes.
Nice.
But yeah, remember, you can find us anywhere. You can find me, JMoller05, down on Twitter, on all the other platforms. You can find Prue, the Prue Patel on Twitter. You can find us everywhere. You can find our podcasts, all the platforms, any streaming platform, we'll have that out. And yeah, we look forward to coming to you guys next week. So
yep. And we appreciate any subscriptions. Thank you.
Perfect. That would be ideal. Like and subscribe. We appreciate it. And take care. We'll see you later, folks.
Good night.